We begin the 2022 Regional History Forum with an historical note. While there have been a few programs in the 43-year history of the series that took place outside of the 1859 courthouse building, there have only been 3 years when all the programs happened elsewhere. The first year was 1997, the year after the 1996 flood, when the building was being installed in its new site, the 7th, and we hope final time the courthouse was moved. Last year, while the COVID-19 closures were in effect, was the second year that the entire series went away from the building. This year, with COVID cases spiking in Wasco County, we've once again gone to Zoom presentations. In case you haven't visited, the old courthouse features the sheriff's office and jail, and the upstairs courtroom where we usually meet for Regional History Forum. The building served not only as headquarters for Wasco County, but also the Dalles City Hall. The original courthouse tells the story of our town's early governmental history. It was restored and stays open thanks to the generosity of members and donors. History Forum programs have always been free. In normal years, we would pass a sock around for voluntary contributions. Since we can't do that this year, we invite you to help us continue these programs and to open the doors for another tourist season with your donation to the original Courthouse Preservation Corporation. Thank you in advance. And now, word from our president.
I'd like to thank you all for attending again. This is the last program in this series, and looks like it's going to be a really good one. And thanks go to Chuck and folks for putting this together, and for Stephanie for helping to arrange things. And of course, as always, to Trish for kind of pulling it all together. We're just happy y'all could come, and make sure you come out and visit the courthouse when we open again for the season. So thanks.
So let me introduce our program today. We've had some interesting connections with the Crown Point Country Historical Society going way back. That's the area around, well, Crown Point, Corbett area, Bridal Veil. And we had programs about the old logging operations in that area a number of years ago. And we've preserved at least audio tapes, I think, from those programs. And just as we preserve the video presentations in these later years. So we're very happy to make that connection once again. And as Eric mentioned, Stephanie Rickert is the one who connected us. She's on our board and she has connections down there. Also a member of that Crown Point Country Historical Society. So we are hearing from the president of the society, Chuck Rollins, and Melinda is doing the technical work on that end of the slides that will be presented. So looking forward very much to this program. We've had programs before about some of our own people, local, the Dalles people who've been on the rodeo circuit. And we have a mural, of course, to Blanche McGaughey Samus, who was active some years before Lorena Trickey, and she didn't reach quite the heights or have as long a career because she married Ted Samus here in the Dalles and retired from the circuit and settled in here, had a long productive life here, and now is featured on one of these murals that we are working on. So we're interested in hearing about Lorena Trickey, an interesting life, and it promises to be a great program. So Chuck, we are all yours. Take it over.
All right. Well, my name is Chuck Rollins. I'm actually the president of the Crown Point Country Historical Society. And 4 years ago, we put this presentation together to do at McMinimum's because they had this historical program and they asked people to come in and talk about local history. We are really quite proud of Lorena. She's our only world champion of anything. And so my partner and I, Steve Lehl, we went around and gathered all the pictures we could find and read everything and talked to everybody we could about Lorena. And this presentation today is what we've learned at that time. Since then, we've learned a few more things, so I'll probably add a few things as we go on through the program. She's our local legend, world champion cowgirl, and we originally called the program the Cowgirl Prospector because she had two careers. She was once described as a 100-pound bundle of luck, energy, wit, and courage, as free as the horses she rode and as rugged as the mountains she mined. This is a photo of Lorena in her first year of competition, and this is 1917, and she actually won the bronc riding and relay race at the Pendleton Roundup. She was born on Valentine's Day in 1893 at a logging camp near the old town of Prineville, Oregon, a sawmill on Larch Mountain, which is close by from where we're doing this presentation. She learned to ride at an early age of 4, and at 10, her father taught her how to break horses. Lorena had a special gift with horses, and she maintained that bond her entire life. At 5'2", she was a wisp of a woman. This is a logging camp up at Palmer, and if you look at the picture straight ahead off to the right, over that ridge is where Lorena's house was. And in 1902, she was a young girl, fire came through and burnt the house down. And as it raged, they moved to what they called Old Palmer, and her father started another house. And a week later, the fire came through and burnt that house out. And so her family were burned out twice in 1 week. And in this picture, you see a few live trees, but all those sticks are what's left of the forest after it had burned. And this is the new town of Palmer. This was a typical house on a large mountain, and this is what Lorena's home looked like. Many old timers would say, whenever you saw Lorena, she was on a horse. A childhood friend said she grew up on a horse and remembered watching young Lorena do tricks like shoulder stands, riding standing up, and standing up on the saddle. When asked if she could remember the first time she ever was bucked off a horse, Lorena said, "I've been riding as long as I can remember. I was about 5. In 1910, Lorena's father took her to the first Pendleton Roundup, where she saw the relay race. And for that first time, one can only imagine that it had a positive effect on her. It's been said in the early years, Lorena rode wild Mustangs in Eastern Oregon with the native people, and that her and her brother were hired to break wild horses. And for every 5 horses they broke, they were given 1. She actually started her riding career in 1917 at Portland with Clarence Adams' Great Western Roundup. Lorena soon made a name for herself using the let her fly technique, in which this was a relay race in which the riders had to make 3 laps. And they used to come in, get off the horse, walk over or run over and jump on the other horse. Well, some earlier riders started a technique where they would jump from horse to horse. And Lorena perfected that. And she had really good, quick, early success and established the technique. Instead of stopping and getting off the horse when changing, she would jump from horse to horse. In 1919, she contacted to ride with C.B. Irwin stables out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. This was her breakout year. Excuse me. Mr. Irwin's instructions to the riders was brief and to the point. They pay off at the wire, so get there first. That year, she won her first national championship at Pendleton, becoming known as world champion all-around horsewoman. Later that year, she won the world champion bronc riding, and Lorena continued to maintain bronc riding, remained her favorite event. She did that at all the events, and it was one of the hardest events for women. And we'll have some slides earlier showing just how brutal it was on them. 1920, she won the McAlpin Hotel Trophy for all-around Cowgirl Championship title at Cheyenne, Wyoming. This is one that she had won on 3 occasions, and she won it again in 1922. And she was awarded a 3-week stay in New York City where she demonstrated her riding skills. This is her second trophy. These trophies are in the Cowgirl Hall of Fame, and our society is in contact with them, seeing if we could get some of these trophies back to put in our museum, which we are currently building. Lorena did the circuit. She traveled all over the country. This is Bozeman, Montana. And there were many venues for women in the rodeo circuit. Lorena's top competitor was Mabel Strickland, and this is a picture of Mabel. And generally when they competed, they were 1 and 2. Mabel, this is her winning the steer roping contest where Lorena did not participate. Being only 98 pounds, the steers weighed more than she did, so she had no luck at bringing the steers down. In the early days, the purse prizes in the rodeo world were about the same for men and women. I like this picture because it shows the girls riding horses. And if you notice, Lorena is the second from the right, holding her one arm up, but she's the one that looks totally at ease at what she's doing. In the early days, the cowgirls were the first, the female cowgirls were the first professional athletes. And they attracted many fans, as many fans as the cowboys. And in some cases, the people came to watch the ladies more than the men, which over time created a rift. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. Yeah, I'll talk about it now. There was resentment from the male competitors. There were statements like, the rodeo is no place for women, and having a woman ruins the event for men, were made at that time. These women are wearing a costume, which are called junipers, common riding breeches of the day. And as today, these women were kind of the head of the fashion. People looked to them and they were idolized, and they had thousands and tens of thousands of fans. So whatever they were wearing, it spread through the audience and their fans. Due to injuries in 1922, Lorena did not compete, but she still participated in the rodeo by showing off her riding skills. She is credited with being the first woman to ride the underbelly of a running horse. This is not Lorena, but it was the only picture we could find showing a woman doing that. This is Lorena and several of her fellow female riders illustrating the early styles of the female rodeo fashion. And this is a cowgirl's howdy. There were many newspaper articles about the girls, and I've looked at quite a few of them, and here's one about Lorena. Former champion sure feels the vision when she gets into her arena clothes. But all the girls were highly respected, and they were contacted by commercial clothing outlets to wear their clothing, just like today. But these women actually helped get women athletes started. This is one of her trick riding exhibitions, but due to her injuries, she could not participate in the bronc riding and the relay races. 1923, Lorena at her best, winning the relay championship at Pendleton Roundup. She was also awarded a $500 silver mounted Himley saddle. This was the last year these saddles were given out. Prior to that, they were given out to the champions. This saddle is in the Cowgirl Hall of Fame, and it's one of the items we're going to hopefully try to get back to display in our museum. But at the time, it was valued at $500, and all the metal on the saddle was silver. This is Lorena and Mabel Strickland, and with some of their native Indian friends at the Cheyenne frontier days. Lorena held a close ties with the native people because they helped her learn how to ride. That same year, Lorena won her third McAlpin Hotel trophy, which included a trip, a 3-week trip to Hawaii, where she was presented a set of spurs that once was owned by the last king of the islands. And in 23, they stopped giving out the trophy and they gave trips to different areas. And so Lorena actually only has 2 of the trophies, but she had won it 3 times. And this photograph was in the Wyoming State Tribune. The Cheyenne newspaper wrote, when it comes to riding, Lorena Trickey of Prineville, Oregon, is second to no man. Her wonderful riding in the Roman standing race is on par with the greatest riders. The paper also noted that Lorena commented on her victory. Well, I worked hard for it. The paper further mentioned that Lorena received more applause than any other person performing at that show. She was loved by her fans, and she had a large following, more than any other women riders. In 1925, she rode to victory in the Denver Post, won the Denver Post Trophy, also winning the all-around Cowgirl World Championship in Chicago, in which top prize was $2,000. In 1926, at the Pendleton Roundup, Lorena lost her pants using a let her fly technique. And she talked about that in later years, saying that what happened was when she jumped from horse to horse, her belt buckle caught on the horse and pulled her pants down below her knees, but she didn't want to lose time. So she just kept on riding. And years later, a man came up to her and said, I remember seeing you there at that race. And she commented to him, well, at least he remembered my face. She also won the Denver Post Relay Trophy in that same year. Of all the pictures we have here, this is my favorite. This is a Roman standing race where the participants ride 2 horses. And in this image, you'll see this is the backstretch. Just how many fans were at this rodeo. 20,000-30,000 people was very common. But if you look close, Lorena looks like she's just having a good time, and the 2 men are really fighting to keep their horses going. They lost their hats along the way, and she still has hers. One of her Pendleton Roundup prizes was a pair of custom-made cowboy boots, or I should say cowgirl. This insert was a picture drawn of her foot to show just how small she was, and they made her boots from this. During the off season, some of the better riders would go to Hollywood and work as stunt doubles. Lorena gained fame as a stand-in for star Mary Pickford in the movie Through the Back Door. She also worked with Tom Mix in the movie Queen of Sheba, where she drove a chariot. In 1927, this was a low point in Lorena's life. She had a long-time relationship with a cowboy, Smiling Slim Harris. And on September 2nd, Slim had been drinking quite heavily, and while in the car, they got into a fight. Lorena described the event this way. I was driven from the car by a drunk, crazed man raising a heavy automobile wrench. Slim chased her down the road for 30 feet, and to save her from being beaten to death, she stabbed him with a thin blade and striking Slim in the heart. He soon died afterwards. Now, I want to state that as a historian, we have to tell the whole story. And this was a hard part for us. And one of the things that Lorena did, she didn't tell the truth at first. She said that someone else had done it. And then she later confessed that it was her that did it, and that there was an eyewitness, fortunately, who corroborated her story. And it took the jury only 75 minutes to find Lorena not guilty as an act of self-defense. And outside the courtroom, there was a loud cheer from all the people that had gathered to see how this trial was going to turn out. But this was a very low point for Lorena, and she thought about quitting the rodeo circuit, but her love for horses and competition made her stay on and keep participating for another year. This is a picture of her during that time. And in 1928, she meets and later marries Pete Peterson. They started a racing stable and began training horses together. Lorena was the jockey and won races from Tijuana to Vancouver, British Columbia. She also won the first running of the Hillsborough Town Flat, a racing exclusively for women. This is a picture of Lorena winning, receiving her trophy. And she was a small woman, but that's still an awful big horse. And this was done in San Bernardino, California. Shortly after Lorena's marriage to Pete, tragedy struck. A train that they were traveling on wrecked, killing several of their racing horses and injuring the rest. After the wreck, Lorena said to Pete, "What are we going to do?" Pete replied saying, "We're behind the 8 ball and we're broke." In 1929, Bonnie McCorrell was killed in a bronc riding accident soon after the event was phased out of the women's competition. Now this photo is not, this is of her, but this is not when she was killed. But I wanted to show it just to show how brutal this event was. In 1929, it was at this point that Pete, her husband, went to Tonopah, Nevada to look into mining opportunities. Lorena was still under contract, made her last appearance in Klamath Falls, Oregon, where she retired as one of the best ever world champion cowgirls. In Tonopah, she started a new career of prospecting with Pete. This was a major change in Lorena, as she had in just a few short years transitioned from roaring crowds to the backcountry of the Southwest. Lorena took prospecting like she took the horses. She was a natural. I do just want to say that those last 2 years, Lorena had so many injuries that it was just too much for her to compete. And for someone to do the bronc riding for that many years, it was amazing that she lasted that long. Now this is an image of Lorena and Pete in Tonopah, Nevada. When they set up there and started their prospecting, of course, they had to have an alternative income, so they started raising chickens and rabbits for the town of Tonopah and the adjoining mining camp. 2 hard winters put an end to that, for all the miners and the people from the town knew she had all this food, so they'd come stay with her through the winter. So she made no money, and they decided to try something different. 1935 through 38, Lorena went to Tonopah School of Mining and Engineering and majored in mineralogy and assaying. She is credited with more than her share of good discoveries of gold, silver, and titanium. Many of the old-time miners said Lorena was the best mineralogist in the country, and there's a funny story about her. That her and Pete took over a claim, and she was out walking behind the old mess hall for the old mining camp. And right there in plain sight was a major vein of gold. And they really made off really well there on that claim. But she said she just looked out and she looked right at it. Looking back, Lorena commented, "It was a rough game rodeoing. In the early days, the old-time rodeo riders are all becoming few in number and scattered thin over a wide range. On occasion, we gals would compete against the men, and sometimes we'd beat them. I got a saddle and a table full of trophies, a lot of good memories, and some not so good. One day while Lorena was out by a nearby waterhole by their home, she met and made friends with a wild 3-year-old stallion she would name Rusty. As in the old days, she was able to earn Rusty's trust. The two of them rode together the rest of their lives. Many of the old-time miners said it was quite the sight to see such a little woman on a big horse racing through the countryside. After Lorena's death, Rusty was set free to return to the herd. For the next 2 years, he would periodically come back to Lorena's home looking for her. In 1966, Lorena passed away, a true champion of her time, with tens of thousands of fans who cheered for her and all her fellow cowgirls. She was active during the time in history that saw major changes for women. One could say that these early days, the cowgirls stood tall in the saddle, and with their courage and strong will, they showed that they were equal. Lorena was inducted into the Rodeo Hall of Fame in Oklahoma in 2000, and in 2008 was inducted to the Cowgirl Hall of Fame in Fort Worth, Texas. This is Lorena and Rusty sitting on their champion silver saddle, studded Himlay saddle. And this was just not too long before she passed away. Our society, the Crown Point Country Historical Society, is acknowledging a donation for $60. You can get this new book that just came out about 3 months ago. And Connie Gantz traveled all over any town that Lorena participated in. Connie went and got the information about every event and all the newspaper articles, and she put it in a book. And so she donated these books to us to sell to raise funds for our museum. And so if anybody is interested in one of these books, we can't sell them, but for $60 donation, we will mail you a copy of this book. But it goes into very detailed information about the aspects of her rodeoing career. And with that, that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
I have a question. The building, is that complete and in existence, or the museum you're talking about?
No, it is not. What the picture you saw is our updated version. We have the door coming in 2 weeks, a double hard, nice big door, and we'll finish the siding on that. And then the exterior will be done, except for the railing. And we are now focusing on getting grants. You guys are up against the same thing, I could tell by listening, getting grants to try to make ends meet so we can complete this museum. But our hope is to have it done by the end of next year.
Okay,
Due to
where is
COVID, it set us back tremendously.
right?
Yes.
Where is it located?
It's located in our town of Corbett on the old Columbia River Scenic Highway, right
Right.
across from the fire hall. And it is estimated that over 1 million people travel that highway every year. So
I bet.
we have a great opportunity here to tell the history of the Gorge and the region.
Very good. I'm glad. I heard about the desire several years ago. My probably a great aunt. Oh, now I'm trying to remember her name. Anyway, was raised there. The E.J. Taylor was a great grandfather of mine.
Well, Lower Corbett used to be called Taylor's Landing.
Right. He's supposed to have lost the schoolhouse property and a gambling debt or something. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah,
Quite
that's
a
a story
tale.
I've never been able to collaborate, but I do have a funny story about him. Is they were located on the river, and to get the steamboats to stop on the way up, because this is before the railroad, you'd put a flag out and you'd stand out on the dock. Well, if they only saw two people on the dock, they wouldn't stop. So anytime anybody had to get on the steamboat, they'd gather all the people they could and made it look like there was a big crowd there, and the boats would pull in and then two or three people would get on. But that's how they were able to get the steamrollers to stop.
Well, another part of a family story is that the kids had to row across the river to go to school part of the time.
I've heard that, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyone else?
It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Well, there must be a few more questions. Come on, everybody jump in.
I don't have a question, but I enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
And I'd like to add one thing about during this time, the women started earlier than Lorena, but they really made their mark during the late teens and 20s. And they established just that women were good athletes and that they could compete. And these ladies that did this really set the standards for where we are today for equality for women. And we're really proud of the role Lorena played in that.
Right.
I have I have a comment and a question. What was the last year that that women were allowed to compete in Pendleton? Was it after the woman was killed?
Yes, it was shortly afterwards, and they stopped the competition, and they didn't start back up until 1975. And
So that would have.
I don't want to get misinformation, but there was a lot of talk of how the men didn't want the women to participate, so this was an avenue of way to stop them. Because they were bringing in large crowds and had a lot of fans, and that's all I'm going to say on it, because I don't want to step on too many toes.
When the women were, they were proud.
I didn't catch all that, but anyone else?
Do you have a name for your the museum and what you're incorporated under?
Well, we are called the Crown Point Country Historical Society, so we're incorporated with that name. And people ask us why we put the country in there, and it's because people thought we were Crown Point, but we are Crown Point Country. But we've also given the museum an Indian name, which stands for the Upper River Trail. And when the water was high here, the native people would walk right through our site on the Upper River Trail to avoid being able to get over to the Sandy River. So we decided to add that name at the bottom of our sign that we're having built as we speak.
Okay. Crown Point Country Historical. So is your address Corbett, Oregon?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I just took a look at the chat, and Shyla Olson says that she's reading Shannico People by Helen
Guyton.
Rees, and Lorena has mentioned this area. When would that have been?
I only caught, we're breaking up somewhat. I didn't catch all the question.
Oh, when would she have lived in the Shannico Bake Oven area?
That I don't know. One of the things we found was when we were doing this research, the different stories, the different articles, all of a sudden Lorena was born in 3 different areas. And so as you go through this stuff, you had to take it with a grain of salt and try to place it together. But we know she was born on Larch Mountain in our area. But one of them had her born in Pendleton, another one had her born in Idaho. And so trying to put dates as to when she was and where she was has been a major challenge. And if I'm not totally sure, I don't really like to say. As one man told me, I think he was from your group many years ago, as historians, we have to get it right. And so it's okay to say you don't know.
Mhm.
So that's always been my motto since that day.
Yeah, I had a question. When she knifed the guy to death, where did that happen?
That happened in Lakeview, Oregon,
Okay.
down on the border.
And did she ever compete in the Dalles, or was the Dalles rodeo not happening yet, or do you know?
That I don't know, but it will be in this book, which I haven't finished reading yet, because we just got it ourselves. But I'll find that out and let you know.
Okay.
I believe the Dalles Rodeo didn't last a whole lot longer after our Blanche McGaughey's time. So that would have been the early 1900s.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Did you guys read the chat comments, Carl? Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Okay, did you read the chat comments? There was some questions on the chat comments, you guys? Or
I
I'm
did.
just somebody click on and read that if you would. Carl, are you gonna work on that?
The only one I see is Shannock
If you
O'Bakeoven.
click on the chat,
living in
her
Shannock,
information
O'Bakeoven.
comes up.
Yeah, yeah.
This book contains
Comes up. I can see she
in 92 where her boys went to Prineville.
and when she writes the
1922.
So something kind of cool that
Yeah.
that Chuck maybe didn't
re-
oh, go ahead. Sorry. I was going to share something else about Lorena, you guys, something kind of neat. She was first cousins with the lady that homesteaded our farm here in Corbett, just a little a ways from where Chuck lives, off Evans Road, off the historic highway. And she was first cousins with Doris Trickey Evans. And then also the last remaining building of the town of Palmer we have here on our property. So it's that building that Chuck was talking about when the fire was in 1902, 1903, and then they rebuilt it. Our building here, we call it the bulb shed, used for daffodil drying bulbs, is the last remaining building of that town. From what I understand. Is that correct, Chuck?
It is.
Yeah. So it was kind of cool. I think I shared that with you, Carl, but I taught hundreds of Portland kids this wonderful presentation that Chuck and Steve put together all last summer, and then added the connection to this farm, and just had a really great conversation about should women be allowed to ride bronc riding, and it was a really wonderful, I thought, wonderful academic lesson in all different kinds of pursuits. I thought it was wonderful.
Do you think women's bronc riding will ever come back?
I doubt it.
I doubt it too.
Yeah, I mean, they never have. I mean, they didn't disallow it. They didn't ban it, but they never offered it again after that lady got killed. I'm forgetting her name. What was her name, Chuck? In 1934, what was her name?
Mabel's.
Yeah,
No.
Mabel Strickland.
No, it wasn't Mabel. It was.
No.
I'd have to go back.
Bonnie McCorrell?
Yes,
Yes,
that's it.
Bonnie.
Yes, when she got killed, and they quit offering any of those bronc riding or bucking, well, bull riding and bronc riding, and quit offering that for women.
All right.
I do give a disclaimer when I do talks. I like to tell people I have a good memory, but it's not very long. So sometimes you just got to bear with me.
Yeah, no worries. I'm getting there too. I can't remember. I talked about it all last summer, Chuck, every week for 6 weeks, and I'd forgotten her name as well.
Okay.
Anyone else? Well,
Very interesting.
I'd like to encourage you guys. You're doing good work up there. And next time I come up, I'd like to come take a tour of what you're doing up there. I'll let Stephanie know, and maybe we can plan on bringing a few people up. And if you think of any questions in the meantime, let Stephanie know, and we'll hunt up the answers for you. But again, thank you for allowing us to make this presentation today. And I want to thank Melinda here. She really helped on the Zoom part of the project. Couldn't have done it without her.
Yeah,
Well,
thanks so much, Chuck and Melinda. Appreciate it, you guys. Thanks, Carl.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Chuck, Melinda, and keep in touch. And if you have any more programs, we entertain putting some more programs up in our February programs. I think we're
Well,
about
we
it.
have a couple more that I wouldn't mind doing.
Very good, very good. Well, keep us posted. I think we'll have our little closing now, and a big thank you to Trish Neal for hosting us once again. And these February programs, well, we're gathering suggestions all year round, and we keep track of them. And along about November, we put programs together, put the series together, and start advertising in December, January. And we'll be doing it again another year, hopefully back at the original courthouse. I think there's
Yes.
some more thank yous in the chat. Thank you from a lot of people, good pictures. They enjoyed it, and we all did.
Very good.
Thank you so much.
Regional Courthouse welcomes members. You can join by going to the courthouse website. Here's the homepage. Click on Join Us. And it takes you right to the membership form. We hope you'll consider joining. Please make out checks to Original Courthouse Preservation Corporation. Thanks for attending today, and we'll see you next time.